Good morning. Today's lesson is on LED, the basics. The parts that you will need for doing LED lighting, what they do, how they do it, and where to use them. Let's start with the lights. Let me get my little pointer. All I gotta do is find the pointer. Okay, I'll use a pencil. The LED lights come in several different sizes. This is a 1.8 millimeter 3 volt, 1.8 millimeter 9 volt. Notice, and let's kind of zoom in on these. If you'll notice, this 9 volt has a little bump right here. That little bump is an inline resistor. It allows this 3 volt light to take 9 volts, 9 to 12 volts in power. It just reduces the power to 3 so that that LED light will function without blowing up. A chip light, notice the chip on the end. A nano light, which is about half the size of a chip light. And then the pico light gets pretty small. We have the bead light. I have to solder wires onto these two terminals. It is a very, very bright 3 volt light. It eats up your batteries fairly fast. I think I've gotten about 26 hours of continued use. This is a mega light, which is nothing more than one of these SMD chips with wires soldered onto each side. This is ribbon lighting. It is a 9 to 12 volt. And a little bit of an explanation. See these resistors? These do the same thing that little bump inline resistor does. It reduces the power to each one of these SMD chips to 3 volts. A little bit of an explanation. All LEDs are created to be 3 volts. And in order to go any higher, which would be 9 to 12, in these two cases, they have to have inline resistors. And if you could see underneath this white tape, you've got a series of connections that connect the power, which is at this end, applied to this end or this end, and it goes through the circuit to the light. Notice these little dots on the sides. You have them on both sides. That's what I had to solder to get the wires to connect to this particular light. Also notice that this is a light yellow and that is a bright yellow. The light yellow is called true white. The darker the yellow, the more warm white light that you'll have. I have grain of rice incandescent light. Let's compare that to the other lights, the LED lights. So you can see that with LED chips, the nano chip, the regular chip, and the pico chip, you have a much smaller area. So you can be putting these in lamps. I put these in lamps only if they're hanging lamps or ceiling lamps. Let's move on to the power. I am frequently asked, and let's back this out. I'm frequently asked, do I have to use battery power? No, you do not. You can use what we call a power supply. Plugs into a wall. This happens to be a 12 volt. And if you read the bottom, it says the output is 12 volt. It comes in 3 volt also, and they look very much alike. So I always recommend that you put a little label on the side or on the back side where you can see it so that you don't grab the wrong power supply. That is also referred to as a transformer. For 9 to 12 volts, you can use a 9 volt battery. There is also a little 12 volt battery, the A23. 1220 size battery, which is fairly easy to find at like Walmart or Walgreens. 2032 is also a very common coin battery, and the 2025 is, again, another common coin salt battery. This is 3 volts, that's 3 volts, and that's 3 volts. We're all familiar with the AAA and the AA. Each one of those is 1.5 volts. So it takes 2 of these to make 3 volts in a 3 volt holder. This one will not last as long, even though it's 3 volts, it won't last as long as 2 of these or 2 of those. While I'm on the subject of batteries, not all batteries are created equal. Here's 2 9 volt batteries. Notice that the sunbeam is taller. It is one of the reasons that a lot of us have problems getting batteries in our battery holders, because most of the battery holders are created the same size. So if you're having some difficulty getting a 9 volt battery into a holder, make sure that you've got a battery that will fit it. And while we're on the subject of 9 volt batteries, the 9 volt battery is the only battery that has its positive and its negative terminals both next to each other. This is dangerous. It can cause a fire if not protected. I use a piece of tape over the top 2 terminals, because if the positive and the negative of these 2 batteries are allowed to touch, you're going to overheat. The power is circulating and it overheats these 2 batteries, and they can explode, they can catch on fire. So when you're storing your batteries in a drawer, and most of us do, cover the terminals of that particular battery. Batteries go in holders in order to function. This is a 9 volt holder. Let's get this down where you can all see it. This is a 9 volt holder. It has an on-off switch. That is a 12 volt holder. It holds the little A23 12 volt battery. It does not have an on-off switch. Generally speaking, I sever the black wire, and it doesn't really make any difference whether it's black or the red wire, but I cut the black wire and insert an on-off switch, push button switch. This is a 3 volt battery that, whoops, the 1220 battery fits into. It's great for using in your little room boxes or for micro lighting because it fits in a smaller space. It does have an on-off switch. Again, it comes to me without that on-off switch, and I have to sever the wire, install the on-off switch, and then add more wire so that these two wires can be connected to the lights. This is the latest coin cell battery holder. This top lifts off, and one battery fits inside. Let's see if I can do this for you without breaking this poor thing apart. It has two latches, and you can see on the inside, you have one battery compartment and a second battery compartment. If you put one battery in this department or that compartment, this one goes with the negative side up, that one would go with the positive side up. Without getting too technical, this combines the two compartments to make 6 volts. Most of our 3-volt lights will not function. You'll actually overtax them if you put 2 batteries in them. Put one 3-volt battery in there, push down on it, and it is 3 volts. That end gets connected to your lights. This is a AAA battery holder. It has an on-off switch. You insert 2 1.5 volt AAA batteries inside of that and turn on the switch, connect that to your lights, and you have power. This is an open face 3-volt AAA battery holder. Because it doesn't have an on-off switch, I have a push button switch that I have attached to the wires. Again, it does not make any difference which wire the on-off switch is on. Basically, it is interrupting the power. That's all it's doing. So it doesn't care which wire I put it in. Connectors. It is necessary to, on occasion, to be able to disconnect your power from your lights. This is the latest one. It's a spring type. You push down on the spring, which opens the inside, and you insert your wire. You push down on this spring, which opens the inside, and you insert your wire. The one thing that I have not gotten across to everybody is that one side is for your red wires and one side is for your black wires. Red wires are positive. Black wires are negative. When you're talking about LED, this is the major difference between incandescent lighting and LED lighting, is that the power on your LED lighting is all direct current. We'll discuss that in a different video. This is your male and female connector. I've got them taped down. It's real obvious why it is considered a male and female connector. Let me turn this guy over. Now, notice that you have a set of screws on this connector. Those screws back out and open those holes on the end so that you can insert the wires into those holes. Those basically the screw, this is just a more modern version of this one and a lot more convenient because this one you need screwdrivers for. And screwdrivers are not always handy. This is a quick disconnect. These wires go to your light, and these wires go to your power. That's called a power jack, and that was the first connector that we had in LED for a while. This is a ribbon connector. If you happen to have ribbon lighting, notice again you have a red and a black wire. That red wire is the positive, that is the negative. And if you look at this ribbon, I cut out a 3-piece ribbon. You have a plus side and a negative side. Obviously, I've got negative here and my negative wire is over here. So if I turn it around, now my plus is on that side and my negative is on that side. And the way I connect it, I slip it into so that these terminals are touching the 2 copper ends, and then I close it down until it snaps, which it usually won't snap until you have it in your hand. Let's take it up. That's good tape. Slip it underneath the terminals. Clamp down until the end catches. And that's your ribbon connector. So there, as you can see, there are different ways to connect your lights on one side and power on the other. Lights on one side, power on the other. When you're using this, always put the male connector to your power. The female connector goes to your lights. In order to have power, in many cases, if you're doing a room box, if you're doing a house, you can't have wires running all over the place. Copper, uncoated copper wire is what I use. It's nothing more than wire flattened out. The coated copper tape, where most of us who have done incandescent lighting for a while understand this is your double run. For LED lighting or any other kind of lighting, you have to have 2 wires. Remember that the wires coming out of your outlets at home, take a look at all your electrical items at home. They have 2 wires. Your flat wire is used for, let's take a look at power. I have here a battery holder, a tester, and a 9-volt battery. I will insert let's put the light with the red and the black wire. Let's tape those bare wires down. Insert the battery. The easiest way to insert a battery, a 9-volt battery, is to put the proper terminals and press until it stays there. Slip your 9-volt battery cover back on. I got a fat battery. Okay. I have a red bare wire and a black bare wire. Let's turn the battery holder on. And if I Oops, you can't see that. It worked a minute ago. Now, many of you are familiar with the tester. Let's turn this upper light off. I'm putting the red. Can you see that the tester is also on? I don't want these two wires to touch, so I'm going to turn the power off. So you could see that the power was going from the 9 volts through the copper tape and to the light. It's basically how your power travels. It has to travel through either wire or tape, one of the two. Now, to remove a battery from a 9-volt battery holder, push down. Don't forget to cover the tops of your 9-volt battery before you store it. Whether you're using wire or flat tape, your power has to have a way to travel from your power source, be it a power supply or battery, to your lights. Wire. This is magnet wire. Let's move it over so you can see it all. This is magnet wire. I don't know why they call it magnet wire, because it's not magnetic. That's tiny, very thin magnet wire that is usually found on the very tiny pico chips. This wire is also found on the chips, and that would be the nano and the chip. This is hookup wire, and this is Kynar wire. Those of us who work with LED for a while, we refer to our hookup wire as Kynar wire. This is 32 standard gauge wire. Notice all of the different threads of wire that are inside. There's 2 strands of wire together. It's double wire. Just like this is double wire and that is double wire. This is 28 gauge wire, and this is 20. Double-stranded strands of wire. I prefer the wire to be just 1 wire inside, because these little thin wires can break off very easily. You got to be very careful with them. This is a single strand, and so is that a single strand. Something else that you need to know when you're using wire on your LED lighting is each type of wire has a way of stripping it. You can strip this and this one with wire strippers. These are the wire strippers that I use. They're put out by Klein Tools. They have a locking mechanism so that you don't get your fingers near that very sharp end. And you can see that it has the different gauges. You're going to want a wire stripper that goes all the way down to a very tiny 32 gauge. And by the way, the bigger the number, the smaller the wire. In Kynar and hookup wire, you have to melt the ends off. I use the tip of a soldering iron to do so. When I plug in the soldering iron, get it good and hot, I lay the tip down and then pull the wire out from under it, and that removes the coating. On your magnet wire, there's only one way to get that off. Well, no, there's two. One, of course, is scrape. You can also get it off with an emery board by applying an emery board to the end. It removes the plastic coating that is on the magnet wire. This is when it gets fun. We have 3 volts of power, on-off switch, going to a male and female connector. So I have power going from here through the connectors up to a spring connector. And I want to test my light. It's always smart to test your lights before you put them in where they're going to stay. So let's take a wired light. I only put the shrink tube on one side so that you could see where my red wire was soldered to the basic 1.8 millimeter light. This is how we get our lights to start with. Not quite as crooked because I've worked with this for so long, I've made it a little bit on the crooked side. But that's how they come to us. The longer wire is the positive. Let's turn this over. The longer wire is the positive and the shorter wire is the negative. So I know where to put the black wire and I know where to solder the red wire onto. Now, as I was saying before, your spring connector has to have one side for the positive. So I take a little red pen and I mark that red. This is my black side. So I will take a marker often so that at no time will I forget which side is my positive and which is my negative. So if I'm going to disconnect this. I'm going to remove the spring connector. No, I'm not. I taped it down. Good. I'm going to push down on that end and push down on the black one. Whoops. And insert the wire. There's my light. Let's connect it. It didn't go on. When it doesn't go on, there's a number of things that can be wrong. And I'm glad this is happening because I know that this one's in. These are in correctly. You'll run into this more often than not. That's the reason. My red wire came loose from my light. So let's try a different light. Remember that the long one is my positive. So I will insert these. So my battery wasn't the problem, it was a disconnected wire. It's best, I set up this board so I could test lights. If I want to test, let's see, this is 3 volt, that's a 9 volt light. I don't have another 3 volt light on wire to test, but I always set a test board so that before I put a light into my house or my room box or wherever it's going, I can always test it on the test board. Put this away so that I can solder it back. That's not a loss, it just means it needs some repair. Let's go to board 8, which is specialty lighting. I ask frequently, can I use a fireplace? Is there flickering lights? This particular one, and I don't know if it'll work, I don't know if you'll see it if I turn the lights out. Turn the lights back on. These are little Pico lights, and they've got orange and red require, on lights that small, it does require little inline resistors. This is a 1.8 millimeter, and that's adequate for a quarter scale fireplace because you get an intermittent flicker. This is most frequently used in 1-inch scale. You've got 3 1.8 millimeter lights. All of them have their red wire soldered to this run of copper tape. If you can see that, all the red wires are going here, including the red wire of the power supply, which is a 3 volt battery. All of the black wires are connected to that run of copper tape. So the power goes from the red wire to the tape, out all the little red wires, out the black wire to this run of tape, and in to all of the black wires on the lights. Let's turn this off. You can get away with using this in a micro scene. You can have a job hiding all of these wires, but they're pretty tiny. Again, for quarter scale and 1-inch scale. There isn't anything that says you can't use this in 1 inch or that in 1 inch. It's just that these were built smaller for the smaller scales. Different type of lighting, and a lot of us have seen it. It's called ribbon lighting. Let's focus out. Ribbon lighting comes in a lot of different colors and sizes. The most common is the 5050, which is a measurement of this and this in millimeters or centimeters. This is true white and this is warm white. Notice the difference in the colors. Notice how close together these are and how far apart those are. When you order ribbon lighting, You need to know how far apart you want your lights to be. I use those for 1-inch scale room box lighting. I will use that in a 1/4 inch because it's shorter and I still have the 3 lights. In ribbon lighting, you have 3 lights per section. Here is the connection point, and there is a connection point every 3 lights. These are the 5630s, so they're 56, 30. Again, this is a true white. That would be the warm white because of the color. This is a 2835. It's pretty tiny. 28 one direction, 35 the other direction. Both of these. Again, notice that I have 3 lights on there, but they're very close together. This would be good for a small room box. That's even a smaller room box. Both produce the same amount of light. The newest one in my arsenal is the 3014. 14 this way, 30 that way, which means this is a little bit wider than that one is at 28. I have not seen these particular ribbon in that close proximity to each other with the lights that close. Notice, before I get to the last one, let's go to this is waterproof, and if I tip it sideways, you can see the plastic coating that goes on top of that. This is used a lot in automobiles and areas where you don't want water to get to those lights, which for those of us who do miniatures, it really has very little application. This is cool white light, and I can tell it a lot by just the configuration of the light itself. Notice how dark these guys are. The darker, the warmer the light will be. Let's turn these on. I have connected all the red wires to the lights to one side, all of the black to the other run. I have a 12-volt light battery with an on-off switch, the male and female connector, wires coming out of the connectors to the copper tape. Power source, on-off, connector, highway for all the power. So let's press it on, and there they are. You can't really see the difference. Now, it's kind of hard to show the difference on lights. If I back this lighting out, you can, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. These are all true white. These are warm white. And I have a power to test the cool white one. The alternate way to test or to power your light. I have a 9-volt battery holder, on-off switch, male and female connector. On this one, it's the male. Male goes to the power. The female connector I have attached to some alligator clips. If I connect that, let's run this up a little bit further. Make sure my power is in the off position. I have a negative side. I have a positive side. I don't let those two touch. And I turn on my battery power and I have lights. This is cool white, more blue white. If these two touch on the end, And it's kind of hard to get them to do that. It would short out that light and it would turn the light off. You don't want the ends to touch when you've got the power going through the wire. Let me put this away. This apparatus is also another way that I test lights, because I can put this on the red wire and that on the black wire. Let's take a look. I've got a 9-volt light here, and I've got a negative wire that came loose. I'm back the screw out. Insert the wire into the end. Screw it back in. Separate the two wires. Put the black wire in the alligator clip and the red wire in the alligator clip, and turn on the battery, and you have power. So this is another way to test your lights. Specialty lights. This is fairly new. Warm white, colored lights, and waterproof warm white lights. This is waterproof, which allows you to put it in a pond or a water feature, and you don't have to worry about the water getting to it. The base is waterproof at the top, and when you screw the top down on it, it makes the connection with the two batteries that are inside. It is 6 volts. Turn it on, turn it off. The colored lights come pre-colored. There's a string of 20 lights. This is the first one that came out, and that was the warm white lights. This is great to put on like your Christmas trees, or this one, or for that matter, that one, as long as you can have a place to hide the connector. These last quite a while. I have not tested the length of time. I did have them on a tree that was on for over 24 hours. If you have a dollhouse and you have several rooms that you would like to light but independent, have each one independent, I have connected a ribbon light to this control panel, and the control panel is put out by Houseworks. I've also attached to the back side, and I don't want to take it apart to show you, but the back side has 2 sets of wires that each of these 2 screws, as you can see, the black goes to this side and the red will go to that one. It's soldered, so it's more permanent. And if you're going to do lighting in your dollhouse, I highly recommend one of these. It has dip switches so that you can have up to 8 separate lighting systems in your house. You can turn the lights on all upstairs or all downstairs. Let's turn this on and let me back this LED up, and let's turn on dip switch 8, and I have turned on this light. I turn on that and my fireplace is on. So you can control. I have one of these in the garage of the house, and then I can just turn on the lights as I need them, because you can have up to 8 separate systems. This is a fun part of lighting your dollhouse. Let's go back to number 9. Let's add I don't want to have to turn this on and off individually. So I'm going to add an on-off switch in line. Let's turn on the lights. And with an on-off switch, I am able to turn on the lights. What if I want to do it remotely? I have a remote control. I connect the receiver, inline receiver, so I can turn on and off my lights with nothing more than a remote control. I can turn them down, or I can make them bright with the remote control. The thing that needs to be brought to your attention about this remote control is that it only works with 5 to 24 volts. It will not function under 5 volts, and it will not function over 25. Let's put 9 away, and let's say you have 2 room boxes. You have 2 room boxes and you want to power them both from one power source. I can remove the power source from this one power source. Now I can connect I've disconnected this power. I'm going to rely on that power for both. Oops, I need a bigger staging area. I have one power source going to a splitter that allows me to light that and light that, all from the one power. This is called a splitter. When you have two room boxes side by side, you don't want to have power for one and power for the second one. All you need to do is use a splitter. The splitters come in 2, 3, and 4. Anything more than that, you're going to need a bigger power source. One of the things that I have to bring to your attention is that your 9-volt battery is going to run off of approximately, you can go up to 50 lights. Remember that 50, and that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. I've got 24 lights on this one 9-volt battery. You can see where using it for all of those and these, I've got these all running pretty dim. If I disconnect the bulk of these lights, that should be a little bit brighter. I've run my battery down, which brings to the final. Let's disconnect this one and reconnect it. When you have a lot of lights, and you'll have one with one of these apparatuses, and you have a lot of lights, power supply is your answer. I wouldn't use any more than 7 or 8 lights on a battery, because you're going to be replacing those batteries frequently. Power supply comes in 3-volt and 12-volt. Be sure before you plug it in and plug that male connector to your lights, make sure that you read this that says 12 volts or 3, and check your output. Output on this one is 12 volts. What are some of the other tools that you'll need? You already saw me use a screwdriver, wire cutters, scissors, craft knife, pen, sanding stick, or emery board. I'm asked, do I have to know how to solder? No, but you'll find out after a while that knowing how to solder is a lot easier. I use a Hakko soldering iron. I use 3 different soldering irons. Make sure that if you do get a soldering iron, that it has on it a temperature control. You don't want to solder any higher than 400 degrees. LED lights themselves do not like heat. So keep the heat down as low as possible. Some of the other things that you'll need are shrink tubes. Shrink tubes come in a lot of different sizes. The most common, 16th inch, 8th inch, and 3/64ths, 3/32, excuse me. I get most of my shrink tubes from Evan Designs because they have a good thin shrink tube. Let me put this all away and open up the chat room. Okay. I'm going to also unmute everybody. All I can do is unmute. You are all unmuted.
That was very
Good
good.
morning, ladies.
Good morning.
If you have a speaker, chime in.
Thank you very much, Lucy. I have to go and to a Remembrance Day ceremony, but thank you for a very informative session.
Thank you all.